It's Sunday, July 17th, 2016, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. Today we're joined by one of our mentors, Felix Sargent, VP of Product at Seamless Docs, to lead a talk today on managing technical debt. Allow me to just briefly explain the format to those of you who may be joining us for the very first time. People you see along the bottom of your screen are mentors and mentees from the current session of the Product Mentor Program. Product Mentor Program is a global program connecting mentors and mentees all around the world to help just make better product managers, better product people, and also hopefully a few better product decisions along the way. So everyone will be introducing themselves in just a moment. And for those of you who want to ask questions throughout the talk, many of you are probably watching us at theproductmentor.com/live. The video is at the top of the page. Down below are the questions. Post your questions there, and we'll get them as quickly as we can over to Felix. So with that all said, let's just quickly go around the room. Everyone just tell a little bit about yourself, mentor or mentee, and we'll start with you, and I will try to say your name correctly this time. I'm really working at it. Therese? Therese. Oh, I'm going to get it. So just quickly introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Therese. I'm currently at a financial services company. I'm specializing in company intelligence. I am a product specialist, or the regional product person as in the last discussion. So I really own the process of product within my marketplace.
Excellent. And Rodmir.
Perfect. My name is Rodmir Labadi. I'm a product mentee. I currently work at a software company in Midtown, focusing on user experience and product management.
And Payvand.
Hi, everyone. My name is Payvand. I'm the senior product manager at Wanda, which is a company specializes in chronic care management, software, apps, and those things.
Excellent. And myself, I am Jeremy Horn, a.k.a. the Product Guy, and I'll be moderating today. And so while it's a talk that Felix will introduce himself in just a moment, while it's a talk by the mentor, he's going to be walking us through a lot of really cool things on today's topic. It's also real time, so ask your questions. We'll get those questions over to Felix as quickly as we can. We'll find a good moment to jump in with those questions. Yeah, post your questions to theproductmentor.com/live throughout the talk, and we'll get those questions answered pretty quickly. For the more generic sorts of questions, we're going to put those at the end. So like, what is a product manager, or what's a product? We'll save those for the end of the talk. If it's topically specific, we'll get it included. With all that said, let me hand it over to Felix to take it away.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. Hi, everyone. My name's Felix Sargent, and I am the VP of Product over here at Seamless Docs. We seek to make government beautiful by taking all of their forms and processes online. I've had a really great time as the VP of Product. One of the interesting things that happens when you take over a startup is that you end up really experiencing what technical debt is and how they manage to build a company from a very green product where you just get things together and get it going just enough in order to be able to get some funding. And then how do you take that and bring it into a world-class product? So before spoiling some of my presentation, let's begin. So we should start out this presentation by being very clear. It always feels like technical debt is your problem or your team's problem, but it's something that absolutely everyone deals with. It's an intrinsic, it's part of the nature of software development in general, and I'm sure with any product, there are always you always feel like you're drowning under the amount of things you have left to do and the things you have remaining, and how do you balance those against your goals? Our product was started about, well, it was originally designed in PHP, and PHP being not the most flexible of tools, we ended up creating lots of bugs everywhere. If you're familiar with the computer science, PHP is a grab bag of global state, and everything interacts with everything, so it's very difficult to separate concerns. Our product was also about 4 years old. And had the maturity of a 4-year-old too. While we could get things done, there was a lot of unpredictability. There were a lot of situations where product would crash, and trying to build new features or teach it to do new tricks would involve it just, barfing everywhere. So, first off, what is technical debt? So, technical debt is, let's bring up my notes so I can actually go over some of these items on here. Technical debt is...
Hey, Felix, we're not seeing your slides right now.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, that's lovely. Can you see them right now?
We see you.
Oh, that's lovely. Okay.
It's enjoyable as well. I'm zooming in as we speak.
Oh, that's awful. Okay, there we go. So let's start off with It's Not Just You. There you go, not just you. This is our PHP. These are the jokes about the 4-year-old, which are endearingly cute and makes our product seem a lot more visceral. But the question of what is technical debt? Technical debt is any set of requirements or difficulties that stop engineers or your engineering team from being able to deliver the features and functionality and quality of product that you would like. Effectively, when you're building something out, you say, oh, okay, I know I need to do this, but I've only got 24 hours in order to be able to get this, and I just won't be able to get it done. And so here's a quick little hack, and we'll get it working. Now, whether that's because your manager is breathing down your neck, or whether your customer is saying, like, look, I need this right now, or else we're going to renegotiate the contract, everything is terrible, and everything is on fire, you think, you know what? Screw it. We could do it the right way. We know what that is. Let's just say we'll mark it down as technical debt, and we'll get back to it later when we have some free time. The problem is there's not really such a thing as free time. And this means that you end up with bugs. Especially if you build things out as cute little hacks, you think, well, it won't work in this scenario, but we know that, and it's okay. It's on the backlog. But as the backlog grows and the product becomes more and more successful because you've had to make the correct trade-offs between getting it perfect and getting it done, you end up with bugs. Now you think, well, you know what, let's just stop. Let's just stop everything. We're not releasing new products. We're not releasing new features. We're not doing anything except solving these bugs. And you think to yourself, oh my goodness. And you think to yourself, this is not the slide deck that I made. And you think to yourself, what if we just squish all the bugs? If we stomp them out enough, then you will actually be able to get rid of them. But that's not the case. Simply killing bugs is not the answer. You can't squish enough bugs and then suddenly find yourself on top of your product because you realize that you've squished enough bugs, but then your market has left you. While you've been making the product that you've imagined, your customers have found new features in another product somewhere else. And the truth is, there will always be more bugs. By the very nature of them, they breed faster than you can fix them. And even in the process of fixing bugs, you'll uncover new ones and add those to your backlog. So, how do we fix this? Because using that information, it seems like trying to make a better product is impossible. It's simply fighting a Sisyphean battle against entropy itself. And in some ways, you're right. It is that way. But if we have a strongly defined goal for what we're looking to achieve, then we can narrow down, we can say, okay, we know we need to fix this. We need to refactor the permissions code in order to be able to support the new permissions model. That's very clear, and we've got a definable outcome. And not only that, it delivers value to our customers. If we eliminate this type of errors, then customers won't be able to see that kind of instability. If we reduce the time that it takes for the page to load, then customers can feel that it's a better and more performant product. And if you break services to separate out concerns, then you can have more stability and at least narrow down bugs to smaller components so that they can have fewer systemic problems. On top of a strongly defined goal, the most important way to systemically pay down technical debt is to have healthy development practices. If you don't have healthy development practices, it's equivalent of saying, well, I have a dirty house, and I'll clean it all up once a year, and then every time I come home, I'm going to throw my clothes all over the apartment. I'm going to leave dishes out. You can't only put your dishes away once a year. So instead, make sure that your team has good code reviews, that you're actively learning and trying to make fewer mistakes from before. Make sure that you share code, that you share concerns, so that there's not one individual engineer siloed into taking care of one part of the product, so that they're the only ones who are responsible for their quality. Make sure that it's a team effort. Make sure that there are healthy, equitable discussions in your company. The key way for things to get gross within your code base and ultimately spill over into your product as your customers experience it are for there to be a responsibility siloed within one person where they can hide their shame. Instead, if everyone's seeing what everyone else is working on, you can hold the team to our collective better natures. And also, most importantly, having reliable automated software tests. Having tests means that you don't need to go over the code every single time. It means you have a identical way of being able to see, does this work or does this not work? Unlike real life, when you leave your dishes out everywhere, where your towels are moldy, it's very easy to tell. You know, the smell alone will give it away. Unfortunately, bad code doesn't smell. You can't know that it's bad without actually seeking out and analyzing whether it's bad. And so you set up tests in order to be able to give you that smell check, to be able to let you know whether things are good or not. There are several really great providers of automated code analyzing tools where they'll do things like test for comments which say to do, or will run automated tests and give you analysis of your code coverage. So you say, like, hey, this entire portion of the application is not tested whatsoever. But again, the most important thing you can do is make sure that your team has high standards for the work that they do. So on top of that, in order to be able to truly pay down technical debt, you need time. And this is where you really come in. Your development manager should be the one who sets the healthy development practices. And if they're not doing that, you need to step up. But I imagine that most product managers aren't the most technical. They are ones to say, like, hey, you need to improve the quality, and you can do that by better development practices. But I don't necessarily know how to implement it. But one thing that I've seen product managers fail on is being able to make the argument for getting enough time in order to be able to pay down technical debt. The most important thing of being able to get that time is making the appropriate case to management. Management is far too often focused on, well, not too often, they're understandably focused on the case that they're making to the board and to their customers, to investors, and so much of that is focused on new features, better product, things that people will pay money for. Whereas technical debt is pretty much the opposite of things that people will actually pay money for, in the specific. But in the aggregate, paying down technical debt means increasing quality. So it's your job to be able to boil up the small components and say, like, hey, if we refactor this application, stability will go up by a measurable %. We will have fewer of these errors that customers will see. The application load time will be faster, or our ability to ship new features will be significantly faster. And you need to make that case honestly and openly to them. Say, hey, we need to do this. The engineering team is really on board for this, but output will decrease for a period of time. We won't be able to release that feature, and we might need to make some trade-offs. But I, as the product manager, think this is the right thing to do in order for us to be able to continue in a sustainable way. Because you will be able to deliver more later with a better architecture and a better review of how the application works in general. In our specific instance, we looked at the PHP code we had, and we looked at the architecture as we had gone through 6 different pivots over the last 4 years and said, well, we know what we're trying to build, but we have 6 other applications that we are not trying to build anymore within our code base. What do we do? So in order to be able, I want to call out a weakly defined goal in here, because it's far too easy for an engineering team to say, I don't like the code, we should fix this, where they're interested from an academic or computer science perspective, or just simply making it better. Removing and refactoring code in order to do things like improve readability or improve development experience is a bad reason to pay down technical debt. You need to rely on your engineering team in order to be able to make these recommendations, but you also need to hold them to the fire and say, like, look, we're not doing this unless there's a really strong payoff that involves a customer having a better experience using our product. Unless you're a development product or you're an open source product where you're actively trying to have people, the quality of your code is the quality of your product in an open source, in a piece of open source software. But if that's not the case, sometimes you're just going to need to say, you know what, we're not doing this. The other terrible situation that comes in is if you don't define that strongly enough, nothing gets released. I've worked with some incredibly brilliant teams during my time at Rackspace where they were quite possibly some of the smartest people I've ever met, but they were proud of their code, so much so that they never wanted anyone to see it because they thought that no, we can't release yet. It's not ready. That we need to fix these bugs. Like, look at the backlog. How can we be done? And I've even seen CEOs with this problem where they will look at the look and feel of an application and say, like, hey, this button, the animation's not really off. I don't really like the padding. Like, we can't show this to a customer. It's wrong. The number one person you need to get that product out to is the customer. Sometimes you can imagine technical debt where it's not necessarily there. The best person to assess technical debt is the customer and the market. And if you hold yourself to your own standards, sometimes you can never actually do anything. You can be completely paralyzed by your technical debt rather than conclusively solving it, because your technical debt is, by your own definition, infinite. And this gets into the core heart of the matter. Technical debt isn't merely just bugs or features that you think don't do what you really need them to do, and or technical debt isn't just about getting through your backlog, because you'll never get through your backlog. Because technical debt is the difference between what you have right now and what you want. If you've managed to pay down all of your technical debt, that means you don't want anything out of your product anymore, which means you should just go home. You're done. You're finished. And I really like Buddhists have a theme along these lines, which they say life is suffering. And in the Buddhist dogma, they're not necessarily saying that life is always terrible, but they have a very good definition for suffering, and suffering is the difference between what you have and what you want. And you can change what you have by working, but you can also change what you want, or understand what you want, encapsulate it, put it within bounds. You can remove the anxiety around what you want and just simply set reasonable standards, set good process. If your existence as a product manager, as a team, as a company, is us being like, oh my God, we're never going to be able to get in front of our customers, and our product is always crap, and what are we doing, and constantly beating yourselves up, you're going to lose good people. People don't want to be around you. That sucks. That's an awful experience. It's not just development. It is the very much act of suffering. And so being able to set good standards, good goals, and most importantly, enjoying your work is the best way you can pay down technical debt, because it's inevitable. And in fact, the analogy for technical debt itself is wrong, and we should stop using it. It's just shit we've got to do. It's okay to accrue technical debt. The situations in which it's best to accrue technical debt is when you're doing exploration. Exploration is when you don't necessarily know your market. You just want to get some shit out there and see if it works. An MVP is an active expression of creating technical debt, because, as I said before, when you pay off all your technical debt, you're done. You simply aren't working anymore. But sometimes when you start a project, you might not even know where to go. Technical debt is throwing the leash in front of the dog, right? It's when you get something out there, suddenly it tells you where it needs to go because the customer is saying, hey, that was great, but now we need this. Can you add this to the backlog? Or this button doesn't do what I think it's meant to do, or you have a bug here. Suddenly you have a backlog. But by having a backlog, you have technical debt. But by having technical debt, you have a product that's worth fixing. So be proud of it. And then there are one-offs. Sometimes you have a big customer who is offering you a boatload of cash, which is going to keep your company afloat, but you know that nobody else is going to use it. You think, well, we could do this right. Well, fuck it, we could just get it done. And sometimes in that situation, you accrue some technical debt because getting it perfect is going to get in the way of getting it done, and even worse, getting other things done for those customers. Sometimes, in a very limited scope, it's okay to let your technical standards slip in order to be able to get something done within a very well-defined scope. Now, you need to know, because if you bet wrong on this, you've given yourself a nightmare. You should always make sure that you plan the perfect version of something, and then you plan a derivative version, because you need to make those trade-offs, and planning is cheap. Not only is planning cheap, but if you're the product manager, you're not engineering. You should never really be doing the engineering, and so you should never be so busy that you can't plan. If you as a product manager are too busy to create good plans, you need to really, really figure something out and refactor that. And maybe that's political technical debt there.
So we have some questions that just came in.
Okay.
First one is from Cornell, and Cornell is asking, can you share experiences making the case for management a challenge for him as a product owner? What methods to make his case for paying down technical debt? What's a stronger case for paying down technical debt that he can make to achieve management buy-in?
Okay, let's see if I can exit this right now and then start showing my face. Hi. So it really depends on your situation. And the most important thing is how you define that technical debt. And it's actually funny, in the way that you ask that question, you're saying, how do I make the case for paying down technical debt? And maybe I haven't truly gotten to that point yet, and maybe I'm jumping ahead. But the most important thing you can do is don't call it technical debt. Technical debt is an illusion. Technical debt is the wrong thing. Define your technical debt. When you want to pay down technical debt, what are you actually trying to fix? If people are complaining about technical debt, then you, as a product manager, need to do some really deep thinking and saying, what are our problems with our application? It's too slow. This feature page doesn't work. People try to do this and it doesn't work. Great. Now, all of those are in the category of technical debt, but if you talk about them as technical debt, you'll never fix them because there'll always be more things on there. But if your application is actually slow, well, that's a great argument you can make. You can say, hey, I know we were, on the roadmap, we're slated to release the version 2 of the reports engine. While that's really important, the key feedback we're getting from our customers and from our support specialists is that the application is slow. The benefit that I see from doing the new reports engine is that, these 5 customers over here who are very noisy but don't pay us any money will be happier. But I feel like we can capture the market or be able to increase retention, reduce churn by improving the quality of our application. I already have some areas that we want to investigate, specifically with our SQL calls over here, which are inducing high amounts of latency, and we believe we can increase the performance of the application by 20%. However you want to come up with those specifications. Now, if I'm a CEO or even just a VP of product with one of my junior product managers coming to me saying that, I think that's great. Okay, cool, do that. That's a much better decision. It's a roadmap decision rather than talking about paying down technical debt. And if I have a product manager who says, the guys really want some time to fix some shit up, I say, what is it? If you're thinking about it as technical debt, that means you don't know what it is. So you need to figure that out. Awesome.
So we have another question. This one for Kwan. And he's asking, would you recommend having dedicated teams to keep an eye on the code, quality, managing technical debt, referring to improvements, not bugs?
Interesting. So I don't believe in QA teams. QA. So it's difficult because there are many different lifestyles of a product, and the phases that a product will go through can sometimes mean that it is worthwhile, because if you're in a large organization, then when you're building out a new product and you're actively delivering new features, you need to you're constantly making the trade-off between, do I do bugs or do I do features? Like, how do I make sure that I keep this thing running, but we're also able to capture the bits of the market we're looking for? But there is a certain point where you say that, for all intents and purposes, this product or this part of the product is complete enough, and we don't want to work on it for a good long time. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have an engineering team on it, because there's infrastructural knowledge that needs to exist. And so sometimes you'll have a B or a C engineering team work on that code, doing maintenance, paying down bugs, making sure that it's still integrated properly with the rest of the suite of your application, such as if an API needs to change. Now, that team still needs to have full ownership over that product. They need to have a backlog, and they need to have an understanding of what they're doing and what their obligations are. And they still need to have all of those best processes. The other thing about it, and this may be a bit Machiavellian, but the B team needs to not know that there is a B team. No one can work on a product knowing that it's in maintenance mode. If they know that, then the quality will decrease dramatically. Or at least there's some touchy stuff there, and that's actually part for a different product. How do you put a product into maintenance mode? Maybe that'll be my next talk. But everyone is responsible for code. Everyone is responsible for the application. Teams should be very well defined by product areas and have specialties within that. But you should never have a back-end team and a front-end team, and then they don't talk to each other. You need to have a team that has some back-end engineers and some front-end engineers, but they're holistically responsible for the entire vision of the product. Because if you have a breakup there, it doesn't work. So if you have a new features team, and then you have a we're just keeping it running team, and it's the same product, it gets really ugly really fast, because the new team is just banging stuff out. They don't care about quality because they're focused on their timelines. Whereas the team that's focused on quality is like, we're dealing with all of this crap and we can't fix the old crap that you gave us. Sound good?
Sounds good to me. The next one is Rodmir.
Okay.
Let me hand it over to him to ask his question.
All right.
Hey, so my question was, how about technical debt that has been inherited from a product? So a lot of what you said has been about managing expectations and sort of, the culture around it. Sometimes it's already called technical debt before you walk in there. How do you handle that? How do you triage that? And how do you sort of change its level of criticalness, if you will, within your goals?
That's a fantastic question. And in fact, I really like it, because the last presentation I gave was how to inherit a product. So I'm now seeing there's a common theme here. The most important thing about when inheriting a product, as far as the technical debt is concerned, is you've got to understand the product through and through. And when it's not that people shouldn't be referring to technical debt. It's that you yourself as a product manager can't think about it as technical debt, or if you do, that means you're lumping it in a certain category, and you're creating a false dichotomy between the new products we want and the problems we have. And those need to be in the same list, right? If your product is slow, then you need to weigh, can we improve the technology we have in order to be able to make the product faster, over releasing this new feature that that our shareholders or our customers want. Whereas if you lump it into technical debt, you're always going to be working on new stuff and never working on that technical debt, or working on that technical debt without having good justifications for it, and you're going to get ruined politically by saying we're going to work on technical debt. And the problem is when you start working on technical debt with the mindset that you're working on technical debt, you'll never stop. It's you're just going down that hill because you think, well, there's more. We're not really done with technical debt, and some product management techniques such as like Agile or will create sprints and say, okay, it's time boxed. It's a technical debt sprint, and I feel that that's again bad because time boxing means you don't ever feel complete. It's kind of like sitting at a really nice restaurant that has very high turnover, and they say like, excuse me, sir, could you finish up your steak? Like you're like, I'm still eating this. Engineering teams don't like it. It doesn't really work too well for effectiveness. But instead, if you say like, hey, I need you to improve this, but here's the metric you need to do it by, and just make it 20% faster. That's our goal. Tell me how you're going to test whether you're meeting this metric. And then they'll say like, oh, but I could work on this more. And you're like, hey, you've done great. This is good for now. Thank you for fixing this specific problem. Let's move on. We've got to build some features for some customers. And that's also an achievable goal. The engineer can be like, yeah, I did it. Cool. And move on.
Excellent. I'm going to go to one more question from Therese. Therese? I'm going to get it right someday. Let me throw it over to you so you can ask your question.
Okay, great. Hi. I'm just wondering more so of the life cycle of technical debt once it is established and flows throughout the product process. Is there a general life cycle dealing with it, like how when it's established? I know you mentioned you don't really want to put it on time frames, but how do you work it throughout the process? Like, is there anything that's used with success? Hopefully that's coming across clear.
So the high-level parts of a product lifestyle are in inception, where you have the idea, MVP, where you build just enough of it to be able to figure out whether this is something you can really dedicate it to, and you can show it to customers. They think, yeah, that's what we want. Let's go do that. Beta, where you start getting more and more customers on board, and you start really fleshing out the core parts of the product. Then there's mainstream, like your product has been successful, it hasn't died yet. I mean, in any of these situations, it can go straight to it failed. Then there's mainstream, where there's broad adoption, you have a core customer base, they're happy, there are probably bugs, but and there are more features that you want to build, but the product is stable. No one's going to go in and say like, you know what, this isn't working out, let's can it. And then afterwards there's maintenance mode, where the application does what it's meant to, it's stable, and any features that are related to it are distant enough that they can be considered independent products. And in all of these stages, you're creating and paying down technical debt in each way. Because, as I said, technical debt is not really a thing. It's the distance between what you have and what you want. Now, in the startup phase, in the inception phase, well, there's not really any. You're either all technical debt or no technical debt because you don't even have any code, because you don't have anything you want. You're basically dividing by zero by that fraction. With MVP, you actually have. You would think that you would have a lot of technical debt, but because an MVP is testing your vision, you have a very limited scope for what you actually want. So the difference between what you have and what you want is relatively small, so it feels like you have less technical debt. When you're in beta is where you have, I would think, the most technical debt, because that's where you've been validated and now your customers are on board. You've got enough customers on board that everyone's saying, that's great, we're really excited for it, but also could you do just this one thing? And then your list just explodes. And then also you have to deal with the architectural decisions you made in the MVP. It's peak technical debt because you know what you've built, you know you've made mistakes, but you're also going somewhere. As the product gets more stable, that's the majority of its lifetime. If it's a standard successful product, it'll vary because as you use the product, customers you'll fix things, and then customers will say, "That's great. Can we also do this? That's great." Da 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 da. But it should approach a point where there's fewer and fewer technical debt, not because the technical debt doesn't exist, but the technical debt kind of branches off into separate products or separate ideas, which starts the phase of inception, all over again. And then in maintenance mode, the technical debt is largely created by changes in the environment, such as, hey, I need to integrate with this new technology came along, we're building a tracing system, the API needs to be updated in order to be able to offer these things, or security updates, right? Where it's not necessarily about the product itself and what it wants to be, but the environment in which the product is developed in, and making sure that your application is still consistent with that realm. That's one of the main reasons you see applications just get old, is that they were put into maintenance mode and no one cared enough in order to be able to fix it, and eventually people just stopped using it. Whereas if you have a team that's on maintenance mode but just really good at it, they can keep that product fresh and current and really good, even if they're not improving things. Gmail is a fantastic example. Like, Gmail it's not even mainstream anymore. It's core infrastructure that is, I would imagine, for all intents and purposes, in maintenance mode. I doubt they're really doing systemic tweaks or adding really deep new features to it, but they're making sure that it's always compatible with everything else that comes along, and they're making sure that it's fresh and current. Did I answer your question? I know that was kind of a spiel. Grace?
You did, definitely. Yeah. Thank you.
I think the answer was yes. So I'm going to go into the next question. This from yet another anonymous, secretive, mysterious individual. This person is asking, how would you approach technical debt that exists with a system or product owned by another but impacts yours? So how would you deal with other people's technical debt? For example, a financial system function for a UI product.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's other people's babies. Actually, no, that's another analogy. Other people's babies are great. We get to give them back. That's hard because you really have to deal with their problems. My first tip would be telling the product manager about the product group and getting them involved, because what you're asking is, how do I make sure that other people don't suck? And that's really a political question, and not necessarily I've seen scenarios where you can. I've seen lots of attempts that have all been kind of wrong. A lot of times it's a political thing. You need to make sure that there's good communication. You need to make sure that your objectives and your requirements are really well laid out, and say, first and foremost, here's what we need from you. Here's the API specification that we're building to. I can product manage our requirements from you. Do you have a really good process? Do you have a good process, and what is that process that we can get things from your team? Then you need the person who oversees your two relationships to be able to be on board and make sure that it's a priority for that opposing team, so that you get what you want out of it. That's a very political scenario. Try to understand what their team's process is, and if you can interface with it at all, that's fantastic. If the more trust there is between teams, the better you can get what you want out of them. an old trick that I used to do is we asked a question for this remote team, for this other team, and they gave us some help. It was kind of mediocre help, but we sent them a thank you gift basket. Like the company paid for it, but it was like who was it? Harry and David, like a Harry and David gift basket with pears and everything. And they were like, wow, you guys are awesome. And so they loved us. And so then on, because we knew that we were going to be working with them for a while, and they would just hop on anything we wanted. Because we got the engineers on board as well. They were super into the idea of helping us. So sometimes we could ask for things technically which only we really needed, but they would be super responsive to it, and that is a super effective way of being an excellent product manager, because there's no one else on your team who can do that, right? It is your role and your role only to manage the relationship between your team and other teams in a non-engineering fashion, and so gift baskets go a long way. And also a lot easier than going to their boss and telling them they suck, or even worse, telling them that they suck to their own face. Flattery will get you everywhere, I suppose.
Great. So there are other questions, but they're much more generic, and we're going to save that some of these more interesting questions for the end, or non-topically very interesting questions for the end. That said, let me hand it back to you, Felix, to take it over, and everyone else, keep your questions coming in to theproductmentor.com/live.
Great.
You, Felix.
So we're going to get a little trippy now. This part of the talk is a little bit more philosophical, but let's see how we go. It might be fun. So, as we talked a lot, technical debt is a philosophical problem. It's not.
By the way, don't forget the slides.
Oh goodness! You practiced. We practiced this like 15 times. I'm just so excited to jump into it. All right. There we go. We good?
We are good.
Okay. So technical debt is a philosophical problem. It's without having real definitions of the actual problems you're having, what you're suffering from is ennui. Of like, well, everything's fine, or maybe it's not, but how do I make it perfect? There's a fantastic Calvin and Hobbes comic where he's just walking down a stream, and he's like, I'm happy, but I'm not ecstatic. And that leaves him with this level of malaise that is totally gets rid of his pre-existing happiness. And it's very easy for us to look at our product this way, and to think like, oh, our product sucks. We work on it so hard, and it's still this piece of crap. And instead, you need to step back and realize, holy cow, I have a job making, typing on a computer, making these imaginary software products, and customers are actually using it. And they might not like it, but they're still using it. And that's still a high bar. There are so many software products out there where people have written something and nobody's using it just simply because it's that bad. Unfortunately, well, in some ways, we all work at the margin, and if your product is good enough to offer you employment, you're doing pretty great. The best way I found to think about product in general is the Japanese philosophy of WabiSabi, and I really said I was going a bit woo-woo here, so take it with a grain of salt. But WabiSabi is the let's see. You've probably all seen these Zen gardens, especially with older product managers who were very fond of Japanese philosophy around the 80s. It's kind of kitsch now, but the premise of these Zen gardens isn't oh, I like playing with sand, although it is really fun. It's that no matter what patterns you create, they will disappear over time. And that things can be beautiful without them being permanent, and in fact, they should be enjoyed for their impermanence and for their irregularities, for the simple nature of them being what they are. When WabiSabi is an expression of the Zen philosophy of things not being perfect, things not being preserved, and the realization that the physical world has no ambition, that you know, a rock simply is a rock, whether it is placed, you know, one side or another, or, you know, the way that we organize sand has no effect on how it feels about itself. And when we write software, we need to realize that there is a strong context towards when we're writing software and for what, and it can be appreciated for that. Trying to always insist on it being perfect is a way of creating anxiety and a way of removing the pleasure and even the pride of what we've already made. Whereas if we accept it for what it is, and then we say, yes, but we can make improvements, and we will make improvements, but there will always be improvements to be made, then you can simply move on and stop the strife. One of the this actually brings me to a point that I wasn't originally going to address, but one of the things that I've realized, I had worked with a client who was always unhappy. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the duck problem, but there was this is a very apocryphal story of software development, where an animator for a video game had a terrible product manager who every time they would show something and be like, oh yeah, but can you remove this, or oh, can you do that? And so when he was animating a queen as a chess piece for this one game they were making, there was a duck which would just fly around it, but it was very careful to make sure that the duck never intersected with the animations that the queen would perform. And he showed it to the product manager, and the product manager's like, yeah, it's okay. Oh, it looks fantastic. Yes, wonderful. But lose the duck. And he would always build something bad into the product because he knew that this product person would always would always complain and make a modification. Now, I'm not suggesting that you do that. I don't think it's. I think the better thing would be to work on that relationship and say, like, hey, if you like it, just say you like it. Don't, But then again, trying to change other people is very difficult. The more pertinent part of it is when you're dealing with clients or your company or even internal engineers, you're going to get criticism. And the most important thing you can do is be cool about it. If you are proud, relaxed, patient, and confident with what you're making, you're setting the standards of how they should feel about your product, especially if you're doing it on an interactive basis. If you go in and say, like, hey, I'm sorry, it's not perfect yet. Oh, our team was working so hard, but actually our engineers are really terrible, and we can't do anything, and I need more resources, and everything is also always awful, then you're going to be viewed as bad. But instead, if you say, like, the team's doing the best they can, here's something we're really proud of, it's not perfect yet, but we're building it out, and you just keep it cool, you're going to make a brilliant product. And this brings us to a second point of Japanese philosophy, somehow, that seems to be really pertinent here, of kintsugi. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But kintsugi is a little bit more obscure than wabi-sabi, and it is the art of mending broken things. And in American culture, it's very easy for us to say, oh, it broke, okay, let's build a new one. Whereas the more the philosophy in Japan has been more like, well, we can fix it. We might need to fix it. We might, I think it comes from simpler times where it was harder to just make new things. But also, household items have a lot of pride and they have a lot of history. And as they show their wear and as they show their damage, they will gain in age. But sometimes they completely break. And kintsugi is the practice of repairing ceramics with gold and using gold paste in order to be able to re-glue this bowl together, which not only makes it functional again, but enhances its appearance through its development and through its age. And you see how that bowl has lived. Now, I know that it sounds like it's difficult for a a software application to do this. You can't literally put gold onto your code, or if you could, you'd have a very sticky keyboard. But it's important to take into account the history and the age of your application. There are some brilliant visualizations which show how a code repository has changed over time. As files get created, engineers will come in as specks of light and then work on the code base as if it's a hive. And when watching those things, you can truly see the collaborative nature for the beautiful things that we're building as products. And your role as a product manager is not just to keep on improving the product, but you're also the custodian of the history of the product. You need to make sure that you take pride in the history that your product has been through, and while it may not be perfect, because you're responsible for the history of that product as it moves forward, you need to take into account its past and see where it truly shines and see where you can mend its dents while still allowing the unique little items that made it important to customers and keeping those around. It's not just about design, it's also about look, feel, appearance, and even just the way that the application loads. And I'm speaking with a lot of pride, and again, I do know this is very woo-woo, but like once you take into account that it's not perfect, you can feel better about it. And once you feel better about it, you can work in a fashion that doesn't feel like suffering. Thank you.
All right, so now we got one more question for you, at least at the moment, one more question. I would love some more context for this question. I'm going to just kind of read it to you and let you respond as you wish. So anonymous individual says, this is not a joke, I'm not like walking into a bar. This is another anonymous individual. Companies have marketing, finance managers, or engineers, but not product managers. Where would you fit in as a product manager? Who reports to you?
So you're forgetting one very important person in that theoretical company, and that's the CEO. I presume most companies have CEOs, and the CEO is the default product manager. If the CEO does not set the vision for the company or what you do or what you build, you basically have no company. And companies, by definition, build products to provide services. Or this was a debate for a while ago, the previous product group, but effectively, your company provides a service. There's some reason people pay you money, I hope. And sometimes, that might just be a simple vanity project for one investor. But most of the time, you're there to do something. And the question is, what is that thing? The person who defines what that thing is your product manager. Product management is a role that has been defined so that as a CEO, you get too busy, and sometimes you need to delegate portions of your job. And with software engineering, there are, you're not just making toys. You can't just say like, this is the one thing we make and it's going to be perfect. Sometimes you have an entire line, and you need line managers in order to be able to maintain the visions of each of those individual products. So product managers exist whether they have that title or not. And so I'm lucky enough to have my job be explicit. But still, actually, when I came in, I had to sell what my job was to everyone in the company. I hope they see what I do. But yeah, it's not always explicit. But the sign of a good product manager is they just simply take ownership for things that could be improved while making everyone happy about it rather than stealing their jobs.
Yep. Yeah. So yes, great answer. It's actually much better than I was thinking. And yes, product managers actually do exist and are in actual companies. Perhaps not yours. I'd love to kind of get more feedback on that. But anyway, that's all the questions we have right now. And Felix, a really great presentation. And I want to thank our speaker, Felix Sargent, VP of Product at Seamless Docs, for today's discussion on managing technical debt and learning lots of new words. And as always, the presentation that Felix just did will be posted to our SlideShare channel. And a big thank you from me, Jeremy Horn, the product guy, and to everyone else who joined us today and the product mentor. And don't forget, if you're interested in being a product mentor, like today's speaker, Felix, to product people of all sorts all around the world, visit theproductmentor.com and sign up today. Session 6, which is our next session, starts January 8th. And if you want to be a mentor, just go and sign up. And also, if you're looking to fill a new product job with a great product person, visit our very own free-for-all job board at theproductjobs.com. With all that said, thank you everyone for joining us, and I'll see you guys all soon. Bye.